Japan Station is made possible in part by Patreon support. If you would like to make sure that I can keep bringing you more content like this, then head on over to japankyo.com/Patreon and sign up for as little as $1 a month.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Japan Station.
Welcome to Japan Station, a production of japankyo.com. This is the podcast where we teach you everything you should know about Japan, plus a few other things. I'm your host, content creator, founder of japankyo.com, and the anime linguist on YouTube, Tony R. Vega. Today I have another episode of Japanese Plus Alpha for you. So Japanese Plus Alpha is a podcast focused on the Japanese language. I was producing this exclusively for my $3 a month plus alpha tier supporters over on Patreon, japankyo.com/Patreon. You can support for as little as $1 a month. Every little bit helps. I do have more episodes of Japanese Plus Alpha coming, but I'm releasing them at a pace of about once a month. I'm not producing more episodes of Japanese Plus Alpha at the moment, but if you want more content like this, let me know. Mail at japankyo.com, or you can go over to X at Japankyo News. Just get my attention. Let me know. Because if people do want more content like this, I can definitely consider it and make some new episodes. But there are more episodes in the bag already. They will be coming on a more or less monthly basis. In the meantime, though, so you don't miss out on future episodes, why not subscribe and maybe spread the word about the show? Anyway, today's episode is all about the color red, kind of, but I won't explain more because then I'll just end up repeating myself. Anyway, here we go. Here's the episode. From japankyo.com, this is Japanese Plus Alpha, a podcast about the Japanese language and its various quirks. I'm Tony Vega, and today we're talking about things that are red, as in the color red. But first, I want to start with this audio clip.
縁もゆかりもない西宮市民の皆様に選出されてやっと議員になったんですわ
I'm sure some of you may remember the video from where I took this audio clip from. So this clip is from a video of a press conference given in 2014 by a Japanese politician by the name of Ryutaro Nonomura. And this video just went completely viral. And in fact, I remember just happening to come across it on the NBC Nightly News of all places. That's how crazy this thing spread. So the short version of the story is that Nonomura, an assemblyman from Hyogo Prefecture, got caught in some sort of scandal. If I remember correctly, he was using government funds to go on trips to onsens and other places, hot springs, right? So basically he was using money that he wasn't supposed to be using for private purposes. And then he held this press conference where he asks the reporters to not get emotional, to stay calm. And then he ends up being the most emotional person in the room. And then at the end of the press conference, after he's done wailing and crying and saying all this stuff,
この世の中をこの世の中を変えたい
about how hard he wants to work for the people of Nishinomiya and blah, blah, blah. He ends up apologizing for how emotional he got. But anyway, in that audio clip, he says something along the lines of, the people of Nishinomiya with whom I had no connection or relationship with chose me so that I could finally become an assemblyman. And he had been discussing how he had always wanted to become a politician. He wanted to cause change and help people, despite the fact that people always say, it's always the same, blah, blah, blah. So something along those lines. And then he was, of course, wailing and crying and shouting. But the reason why I chose this clip, aside from just using any excuse I can to rewatch this clip, because it always just causes me to laugh, seeing just the absolutely absurd way in which this man handles this situation. But the reason why I chose this is because he says something that's going to link to the actual first thing that I want to talk about. So he says, En mo yukari mo nai.
En mo yukari mo nai.
This literally means no connections, no relationship. In this case, en means something along the lines of relationship, and then yukari means something along the lines of connection. And then nai means no, or it does not exist. So en mo yukari mo nai. So he's saying the people of Nishinomiya have no connection to him. In other words, he was basically a complete stranger to them. And the first thing that I actually want to talk about is the phrase aka no tanin.
赤の他人です。
So aka no tanin means basically a complete stranger, all right? Aka no tanin. So when you're looking up what this word means in Japanese, or when you're looking up explanations, often you see the phrase en mo yukari mo nai used because you're describing a person that has no connection or relationship to you, right? So that is what a complete stranger is. And so that's why I thought I could start with that clip of Nonomura saying that, because that thing is burned in my mind. So when I read those explanations, I thought, I know, I'll use that clip from Nonomura. And now that we're here, we can talk about the actual stuff that this episode is really focused on, and that is phrases involving the word red in Japanese, which is akai or aka, right? Aka is the noun form, akai is the adjective form. So going back to what I was saying just like a few seconds ago, aka no tanin means a complete stranger. But when you translate that literally, what you end up with is a red stranger, as in the color red, right? Aka, in this case, is red. And then tanin is stranger, even though literally it means like other person. But yeah, that means stranger. No is basically linking these two components. It's kind of a possessive, although it's kind of a little bit different, and I won't get into that. But basically, aka no tanin means a red stranger. But in actual conversation, it means a complete stranger, right? Like, that guy's a complete stranger. I don't know that person. And this is a very commonly used phrase. I mean, maybe commonly used is not the appropriate term, but I've heard this plenty of times in actual conversation. I've heard it in media. This is not some obscure phrase. It's actually something that you're likely going to hear if you're exposed to enough Japanese. Now, why is it a red stranger, right? Why is it that a stranger that is red is a complete stranger? Why is it not a blue stranger or a yellow stranger or a purple stranger, right? Well, there is an explanation. Now, of course, with these, like when you're looking into etymology, I know I've said this before, but oftentimes things can get a little shaky, and oftentimes there's no 100% certainty in these explanations. But the most likely reason for this is that aka was not always red. Even though it's written using the kanji for red, that is kind of a later ateji is what they call it, but when you assign a kanji after the fact. So what is more likely is that aka derived from a different word, and that is maybe akarui, which means bright or something along those lines, or akiraka, which often is used to mean something like clear, or like as in clearly that man is a stranger, or obvious, or something like that, right? And that makes sense, right? Because, you know, especially if it's something like akiraka, I mean, that's clearly a stranger. That man is obviously a stranger. But at some point, I guess they just threw on the kanji for red, and that's what we got. Now, how exactly this happened? When did this happen? I don't know, but there are other phrases that back this explanation up. So in a nutshell, this aka is just being used for emphasis in a way, right? It's not just a tanin, which can mean stranger. It's an aka no tanin. And that means like, this is a complete stranger. I do not know this person at all. So aka, again, just basically being used for emphasis. Now, did it really come from akiraka? I don't know, but that seems to be the most favored explanation. Let's go to our next term, because we're going to see that is going to reinforce this explanation. And that next term is makka na uso.
Makka na uso.
So uso means lie, and then makka means like completely red, totally red. So put that together and you get like a totally red lie. What this means is basically like a bold-faced lie, an obvious lie. Now, in this case, we also have the kanji for red being used, right? So this is pronounced a little bit differently. It's not just like aka, right? It's makka. you use the glottal stop, right? And when you write it in Japanese, you would use like the little tsu, the hiragana, right? And then you have the glottal stop. So you stop in between the ma and then the ke, makkano so. The first kanji for this can mean something like true, but basically it's just saying like really, something along those lines, right? So it's a really red lie. So, okay, a really red lie. I guess you can kind of link it up with the bold-faced lie, how we would say in English, right? An obvious, total, in-your-face lie. You can't even like try to hide that because it's just so obvious. Now, again, here we go, right? That aka seems to be being used here for emphasis, right? And when I looked it up, that seems to be the explanation that is most commonly given, that the aka here is just being used for emphasis, okay? So you're really, really emphasizing how much of a lie this is. Next up, we have another one that is also being used for emphasis, and that is akapaji.
今日はそんな赤っ端シチュエーションをお楽しみください。
So, aka, again, we started out here with the kanji for red, but who knows when this came about? Could have been a different kanji, or maybe it was always just hiragana, but with the intention of it meaning something like akiraka, right? Like we were saying in the case of aka no tanin. And then the paji in this case comes from haji, which is like disgrace or embarrassment or shame or something along those lines, right? Haji. So put those two together, the red and the haji, and you get aka paji. And again, you have that glottal stop in between the aka and the haji, which becomes paji, which is fairly common when you combine things with the hahi hu he ho ro of sounds in Japanese. And that's a whole other topic. But anyway, aka paji. And again, this is just emphasis, right? You're really exaggerating. You're emphasizing the fact that this is something disgraceful, something shameful, something really, really embarrassing. So here we have three cases where the aka, red, is just being used for emphasis, right? We don't see any different colors. We're just seeing red. And in a way, you can see how it works in a literal sense too, right? Because again, we're talking about lies, bold-faced lie, a red lie. I don't know, it kind of pops out. The red color is really attention grabbing. And then haji, right? Embarrassing. It kind of works, I think. Like, I don't know, something embarrassing being red, it just comes off as even more embarrassing for some reason, in my mind at least. But anyway, let's get to the next one, which is a little bit different. It's not really for emphasis at all, but it's still using the kanji for red, and that is akachan.
赤ちゃんってどうやってできるの?
So akachan, super common word. I'm sure that pretty much anyone listening to this is already going to be familiar with it, but that means baby, right? So aka, again, written using the kanji for red, and then chan. I'm sure you probably know what chan is, right? It's this kind of suffix that's used. It's almost like a diminutive kind of suffix, right? Often you'll hear it used after a person's name. So, for example, Satoko-chan, right? Satoko, little Satoko. It's not the best translation because you can't really translate chan 100%, but you get the idea. So an akachan is a baby, but why is a red chan? Why is a red little thing a baby? The explanation that I saw is that when a baby is born, their skin is kind of red. That might be because I guess their skin is a little bit thin, and so you can kind of see like the blood or something along those lines. I don't know, but another explanation that I saw was because when babies cry, their face turns kind of red. But really the main one that I saw is because they are actually like their skin is kind of red when they are very, very young, kind of newborns, maybe, you know, a month old or less. I'm just kind of estimating here. Now, one thing that I saw suggested is that akachan is only for very young babies, but I think it's used pretty widely for any, maybe even like 1-year-old, right? For any kind of just baby-ish infant, I guess. And it's also used in a more general kind of cute sense. So you might hear something like panda no akachan, right? Panda means panda, like the animal. So a little baby panda, just kind of how we do in English, right? Yes, I guess it would be a panda cub technically, but you do hear us say baby panda or a baby, some kind of other animal. I don't think you hear baby dog so much, but you know, it's certainly a little bit flexible. It's not necessarily only humans. And that is certainly the case with akachan. Now, there are some other words for babies too, and that is akago for example, which is red child. And then there's also akambo, akambo. Now, bo is interesting in that it's used in other words as well. For example, abarembo, and that means something like a wild child, kind of a rebel. There's also kikambo, and that means kind of a naughty child, somebody who doesn't listen. Bo can mean various things. In this case, it's being used to mean a child, especially a boy. It has, I think, a more strong association with boys, but maybe it can be used in a more general sense too. I think that's okay, but really mainly boys is what I hear it used with. Now, interesting thing here is that even though akachan, you can use it with, for example, panda and maybe some animals, it starts to sound weird if you were to say panda no akambo. I've never heard anybody say something like that with akambo, and probably that's because bo is really used for people, so it starts to sound weird when you use bo with animals. So just interesting little quirk of that. Even though they're all equivalent to baby in English, there's a slightly different usage with these. Now, as I said, this aka does not seem to be used in the sense of emphasis, right? Like the other three cases. But I do have one more interesting term for you that does seem to use aka in that sort of emphatic way. And that term is sekirara.
私のダイエット事情についてですね、赤裸々に全て話していきたいと思います。
So sekirara is a really interesting term in that I had heard it tons and tons of times on Japanese television, but I'd never really thought about it, and I never really thought about how it was written and why it was written in this way. It was just this word that I would hear and I understood it, but again, didn't give it much thought. So sekirara. Seki is written using the kanji for red. So it's using the other reading for the kanji, not aka, but seki. And then ra, the first ra is written using the kanji for naked, all right? And then the third kanji is this kanji that's basically for duplication. So there are many words in Japanese that are duplicated or reduplicated, as you would say in the linguistic academic world. But ra, right? You have seki, ra. So instead of writing the kanji for naked, ra, twice, then you just write this second kanji as this duplication kanji, and that just means read it the same way again. And here's a little tangent for you, but razoku basically means nudist in Japanese, right? Naked tribe. That's what it literally translates to. But anyway, so sekirara means, it does not mean red naked. It means like to be really open, honest, just to let it all out, to really not hold back. And so this is a word that I think I've only really heard on Japanese television, sekirara ni hanasu, or something like that, right? And usually you're going to hear, by the way, hanasu means to talk. So to talk in a sekirara way, to not hold back, to just let it all out, to just be completely bare and naked, and to just let your soul out into the open, I guess you could say. That, as I was saying, you only really hear this on Japanese television, I think. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody says it in daily conversation, but I've heard it the most in Japanese television. That's because, for example, you have a television show where you have some celebrity come on and really spill the beans about their life, right? They kind of take you behind the scenes and tell you all about their mysterious childhood, for example, or like their love life or their recent divorce or something like that. And so the Japanese television show is going to use this term to really emphasize that. So they're not just taking off their clothes in a metaphorical sense. They're really going all for it. They're one step above that. They're really emphasizing that. And so they add that seki, that red, to the beginning, and you get sekirara. I have no idea when this term started, but I find it fascinating. So I would love to find out like the first citation of this term. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it, but there you go, sekirara, right? As well as several other terms using the word red or some variation of it. So really interesting how red in Japanese has come to take on this sort of like emphatic prefix role, right? Now, you can't just add aka to anything. It's more or less kind of like these set phrases. And there are a few other terms that use read, although they're not all in this emphatic way. I am going to mention maybe one or two in the post ending here, in the post outro. So if you're a patron, stay tuned for that. And if you're not a patron, well, of course, japankid.com/Patreon if you're listening to this way after it was released on Patreon. But anyway, that does it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time on Japanese Plus Alpha. All right, so here's a few more for you, and some may be more useful than others, but either way, here is a few more read terms in Japanese, right? So first we have seki ri. Seki, again, the other reading of the kanji for red, right? We have aka and then we have seki. Seki ri. Ri is written using, well, basically it means diarrhea, all right? So seki ri, red diarrhea, this means dysentery. And if you don't know what dysentery is, well, look it up, because I think this is a fairly easy to understand translation, right? Like you can get why they would name dysentery seki ri. Next up, we have akaji. Akaji, this is a very common one. Literally, that means red letter, and that means to be in the red, right? Like financially. So in English, we say to be in the red when you are not making a profit, right? When you are losing money in your business, you are in the red. And in Japanese, you say you are red letter, akaji. And I'm pretty sure that just comes from the fact that traditionally, right, in an accounting ledger, you would write your losses in red. And lastly, we have sekihin. Sekihin. This is one that I did not know. I don't know if I'd never heard it, but I just couldn't remember it when I came across it. So I probably never heard of it. But anyway, sekihin means extreme poverty. Again, seki, red, and then hin in this case means poverty. So red poverty, I can get how that would mean red poverty, right? Like why it would mean extreme poverty. Like to be in the red is usually not a good thing. I think there are similar expressions in English, or at least in the US. I think I've probably heard something like that, like to be in the red. Kind of connects back to akaji too, right? To be in the red. And it kind of links back to that whole emphasis thing too, right? Like you can get how seki might be being used in a sort of emphatic way in this case. But I don't know exactly when this word was created and where it popped up. But it exists, and now you know it, right? So there you go. Now you know 3 more in addition to the ones that we covered in the main part of the show. Hope you found that interesting, and I'll talk to you next time. Wait, here's one last minute addition. So as I was editing this, I happened to come across a 1979 song called Akai Torakta, and that means red tractor. It's a song sung by Kobayashi Akira. He's a singer. He's done other stuff. And this song just blew me away. So it was for a tractor commercial, and it is the most like epic tractor song that I've ever heard, and I can't think of any other tractor songs that I've ever heard, but and it's got this amazing solo. So I'm just gonna end the episode with this gem of a song. Again, it's called Akai Torakta, Red Tractor. Here we go.
忘れちゃったぜやつのことなど甘い都会の過ぎた日のこと燃える男の赤いトラクターそれがお前だぜいつも仲間だぜさあ行こうさあ行こうこの大地の懐に探そう二人の花草の香りが俺は好きだぜ